You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the productivity specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today is episode 420, the real reason I created the decision-making series. If you're a successful, busy, small business owner who wants the straight talk on what it takes to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. I just spent 3 episodes teaching you a complete decision-making framework. Today, I'm showing you what it looks like in action. I'll walk you through the real business decision I was working through behind the scenes, the blocks that showed up, the tools I used, and what I ultimately decided. This one's personal, so stick around. And now, let's get to the straight talk. If you've been listening to the last 3 episodes, episode 417, 418, and 419, you just went through my entire decision-making series. Part 1 about the hidden costs of delaying decisions. Part 2 gave you the 16 tools to actually move through those decisions. And part 3 was all about trusting your gut and giving yourself permission to act. And I want to share something with you. That series wasn't just for you. It was for me too. While I was creating that content, I was actively working through a real business decision of my own. So today, I'm pulling back the curtain and I'm sharing what that decision was, what blocks showed up for me, which tools I used, and how I ultimately moved through it. Because teaching you a framework is one thing, but showing you exactly how I applied the framework is completely different. So I started with one simple question. And it's a question that I had been holding for a little while in my business. And that question is, what do I need to do to sustain podcasting for the long term? Because I love to podcast. It's one of the best decisions I ever made for my business. And I don't want to stop. But the pace, weekly, every single week for 8 years, my time, my team's time, the energy and the attention it takes, I had to ask myself if I could keep doing it this way for another 8 years. And the answer was yes, I could do it, but I didn't want to do it. So that is a really important nuance that's going to come up throughout the rest of this episode. But I think it's worth exploring that nothing was broken. And that was my first hesitation moving into this decision, was that I wasn't doing it to fix something necessarily, but doing it solely because it was something that I wanted. Now, I bet you're wondering, what is the decision that I made? Well, the decision that I made is that I am moving the Small Business Straight Talk podcast to an every other week publication. And that means there's going to be about 2 episodes a month, and we are no longer publishing every single week. Now, you might be thinking, that's just not that big of a deal. But stick around because I'm going to be showing you how our brains can lie to us and how this did feel like a big deal to me and how I used all the tools that I taught you in this last series to move through this decision making and how I got there. So in episode 417, I walked you through the 4 categories of decision-making delays: fear-based delays, thinking traps, calibration challenges, and avoidance patterns. And I gotta be honest with you, 2 of those 4 categories, they showed up in a big way while I was making this decision. The first was fear-based delays. Let's start with the most obvious one, fear of making the wrong choice. This is my number one marketing strategy. The podcast feeds nearly every lead into my business. It's proven, it works. So when I started asking myself whether I should change the schedule, there was a constant background noise in my head saying, but what if I lose my audience? What if I disappoint them? What if it breaks my business? And here's what made it louder. I wasn't trying to fix something that was broken. I was trying to change something that was already working and working well. If the podcast was struggling, honestly, it might have been an easier call. However, because it's successful, the stakes on messing up felt much higher. Can you hear how that fear works? It uses your own success against you. I'm going to move to the next one because then there is fear of judgment. I've been showing up weekly since 2017, over 400 episodes. That's part of my brand, consistency. And the thought that kept creeping in was my listeners are going to think I'm quitting. And as a business coach, my decisions are incredibly visible to my audience and to my clients. So the fear tied to telling me that if this didn't work out, everyone would see it. And that honestly added a completely different layer of fear of judgment for me. The next was fear of exposure. And this one sounded like, people are going to think I can't keep up with my own commitment. But here's what's interesting. I teach letting go to make room for new or maybe even better things to my own clients. That's literally what I coach my clients through. And yet, when it was my turn to do it, that fear of looking like I couldn't handle it was right there. I teach this, and I still had to work through it. Working through it isn't the problem. That is part of the process. We are all a work in progress. The challenge is having these fears and letting them make you stuck and you lose momentum and you don't move through them. Or you have these fears and you let them fester and it stresses you out. Now, the final one I want to talk about under this category was loss aversion. The results that I've built over the years having a weekly podcast, the audience, the leads, the momentum, that honestly felt too valuable to risk. Loss aversion isn't about logic. It's about the weight of what you've already built, making it feel impossible to change course. And for me, because it was working so well, it was like that little voice saying, don't fix what's not broken. Don't change what's not broken. And I had to keep anchoring myself in something bigger, which is what we're going to talk about soon. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I want to continue. I'm going to walk you through the next category that I found myself in as I was making this decision. The second category that hit me was the calibration challenge. This decision felt enormous, and I get it. It probably isn't, and you're thinking, how is this woman doing an entire episode about one decision? But I want you to think about yourself. I want you to think about decisions or indecisions that you have right now for yourself. They feel big. There is no judgment. Every time I work with my clients, I understand the weight of the decisions that we are experiencing, whether they are or are not. And in this case, when I'm in it, just like when you're in it, they feel enormous. Now, I'm on the other side of it. I can actually kind of laugh about it. And I'm being honest with you, that perspective needs to shift to be able to move through decisions. But let's just acknowledge those feelings that we have in the moment. To me, this feeling felt like it was going to define everything moving forward, right? Like you can tie these all back together. This decision, if it breaks something in my business, it's highly visible. Like you can just keep going down this whole thought pattern. But here's the truth. It probably wasn't that big of a deal, right? And you can see that from the outside. But most people, you listening, probably don't even care. And I get it. You're like, cool, I can't keep up with weekly episodes anyways. I'll listen every other week. You might be thinking, I wouldn't have even noticed if you didn't do an episode on it. Like those are real things that are just equally as truthful as the line of thinking that I was finding myself in when I was moving through this decision. So obviously the decision felt so much bigger than it actually was. The second thing, and this is where I get tripped up the most over the years, and I'm so hyper aware of it that as soon as my mind goes there, I can pull myself out of it quite quickly, but it felt like it was permanent. Like once I had made this change, there was nothing going back. That entire thing is calibration working against you. You're making a reversible decision feel like it's permanent. And because this is where I tend to go to, that is exactly why I was able to create that framework in part 2 of this series to help you move through the decision-making matrix. Asking and answering, what are the stakes of the decision and is it permanent or reversible, to help you understand how much time, energy, and attention that you need to be putting into each decision. Looking at a decision as permanent or reversible, I actually learned this from my business coach over a decade ago. And I remember him telling me, Amber, you are treating every decision as if it's permanent. And there's very few decisions in business and life that are permanent. And he gave me a very clear visual or analogy. He said, if you can think of a decision as you're walking through a door, but before you walk through the door, you don't actually know what's on the other side of the door because you can't see through the door. So if you can think of it as walking through the door and you get to the other side and you don't like what you see or what you're experiencing, you can choose to walk right back through the door. That was it. Like him explaining it to me in those simple terms, every single time I feel like I'm stuck in a decision, the first thing I visualize is, can I walk through the door? And is there an opportunity to walk back out the door if I want to? Now, that is just one of the tools I use. I'm actually going to walk you through every single tool that I used. I just want to say that knowing what is getting in the way of making the decision. So for me, it was fear and it was calibration challenges, is only half of the solution, but it's definitely an important half, because then you can go back to the tools that I shared with you and determine which of those tools are most applicable to help you move through making the decision. And those tools, I gave you 16 of them back in episode 418. Now, I did not use all 16 tools, and you will not either. However, I did use quite a few of them. And the number that I came to after I was reviewing it was 10. I used 10 of the 16 tools. Now, before that number scares you, I just want to say some of those tools were incredibly quick, like under a minute. They were questions that helped me reframe how I was thinking about the decision. Not every tool is a deep exercise. Some are just the right questions at the right time. And that is the point. You don't need every tool for every decision. You need the right ones for your decision and the challenges you're moving through and the challenges that you're moving through. Now, when I say some of these are quick and under a minute, that is amazing news, because I just shared with you a lot of inner chatter that I had about this decision. And if I didn't have these tools, I would have ruminated on them. I would have let them fester and multiply and take over until I was frozen and indecision. But because I have these tools in my toolbox, I'm able to take them out and move through them. Now, honestly, sometimes it's like whack-a-mole. You get rid of one and another thought comes up, and you get rid of another and another thought comes up. But that is the process. And I want to tell you that if that's what you're experiencing, you're doing it right. Nobody is immune to having thoughts that don't support them positively. It's about what are you going to do with them. So let me run you through all of the quick ones that I used first. The first was evidence inventory, aka positive proof. This one I reached for. This was where you look for all the proof that you've made good decisions before. And for me, this was a really quick access of just a couple high-level decisions that I did actually specifically around the podcast. And the first one that came up for me was that I literally changed the podcast name from Productivity Straight Talk to Small Business Straight Talk. And when I tell you that that was so much bigger of a decision than changing the schedule, it was a new name, it was new brand, new identity. Darn near everything had to get touched in my business to change the name. And guess what? It all worked out. And so that reminder gave me the confidence that I could navigate this one too. The next quick one that I used was the worst case exercise. It helped me get specific about what I was actually afraid of. Because when fear is vague, it feels massive. Let me repeat that again. When fear is vague, it feels massive. So the antidote is to get as specific as possible about what you have fear around. And when I took the time to get specific about what I was actually afraid of, it was that the change would hurt my business. And guess what? If it hurt my business when I walked through the door and saw what was on the other side, I knew I could walk it back. That's it. When I actually sat down and put it on paper and took it out of my head, it was not as scary as sitting and living inside my head completely as a general fear. I know that I am business savvy enough, I have enough experience that I could undo a decision if I thought that it actually hurt the business. All right, the next quick one was the decision deadline. And this one really came naturally. I knew I wanted to start by Q2. And I didn't set an artificial date on the calendar, but I did have a target that kept me moving forward instead of spinning. The next one is an input limit rule. And this one kept my circle small. And this is generally how I roll. I don't ask everyone for advice. That's just not my personality. It's not how I move through decision making. I have a very small, curated group of people that I trust. And so I ran the idea by a few people. But I have to be honest, I wasn't actually asking for permission when I was talking to them. I was articulating my decision and my rationale out loud so that I could hear myself. And that was a powerful version of this tool because sometimes you don't need other people's opinions. You just need to hear your own out loud. And that's exactly what I did is I used a small group of people as a sounding board. And each time I did, I was more and more clear that the decision I was making was the right decision. Next, the stakes check. This one was eye-opening. When I looked at the actual data, how risky is this actually for my business? If you keep hearing the through thread, I was going to break my business. That's the words I used internally. The data didn't actually support that because I have recently opened up 33% more coaching spots back in January, and I've been on a wait list for the last 3 months. So the business is healthy. The demand is strong, and I don't think that moving to every other episode is going to cut my business in half. Like, that's just not how the data works, right? And so the real stakes of going every other week were probably, and are probably, I don't know yet because we haven't done it, are much lower than what my fear was telling me. So those quick just questions, reframing, clarity, that cleared the path. And the real shift came from the next 3 tools that I'm going to share with you. The first was the audience audit. And this one was pretty big because I had to remind myself that I don't owe anyone anything. And I'm going to say that as lovingly as I can. This is free content. I don't owe anyone anything. And to be honest, as I went through this, I was like, who decided it needed to be weekly? What an arbitrary publishing schedule. And my favorite shows and sitcoms that I watch with my husband before we go to bed don't even go every single week. They have seasons. And so where did this even come from? I needed to do what was best for me right now. And I knew what the answer was by just the question that I was asking. By asking the question, should I go every other week? That told me that's exactly what I needed. And I'm going to say that again. The fact that I was asking the question the way I was and the way that I framed it and with such specific clarity told me the answer. And the second tool that had the biggest impact was my business, my vision of success. When I filtered this decision through what I actually wanted, it got clear real fast. I knew that I wanted more time back. I didn't want to have to keep having weekly deadlines every single week. I wanted the business to feel lighter. And I wanted to shift my time from podcasting to working on the business, specifically updating and upgrading some behind the scenes operations. Now, that's not quitting. That's not scaling back. That's being strategic about where my time and energy go. And I felt called investing it in other places in the business right now. And then the third one. This is the one that changed everything and the one that I shared with you on my own framework around the balanced decision-making matrix. Was this reversible? And this was the breakthrough for me. I sat down and I ran my decision through my own matrix. And what came out of that process was the realization that I didn't have to frame this as a permanent decision. I could try this for 6 months. I could test it. I could evaluate it. And if there are no negative effects, or at least none that I'm not willing to accept, then I make the decision permanently. And if I wasn't doing an entire episode about this, I would just quietly turn it into permanent. That shift from permanent to 6-month trial changed it. Changed the game, changed my mindset around it. I was like, that decision went from feeling like I was closing a door to feeling like I was running an experiment. And I love the idea of making decisions like an experiment. So you're not so attached to it, you're trying something out. And just by using the word experiment, you're like, obviously, I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. I'm not a mind reader, but am I willing to run the experiment? And I am. That tool that I shared with you was where the breakthrough unlocked the whole decision for me. And so that's what I'm going to do. I am going to go to every other week and I'm going to do it for 6 months. And then I'm going to reevaluate. And then, well, I guess you're going to know if I don't come back to weekly, there was no major changes. Now, I'll say this with the caveat, I actually think I might miss podcasting as often as I do. So I could also choose in 6 months that I have redirected enough time, energy, and attention to the back-end operation projects that my team and I are working on. And those have come to a conclusion, and I'm ready to get back into podcasting weekly. That could also be true. I'm open. It's an experiment. But right now, it's 6 months and then probably going to permanent. So out of the 16 tools I shared with you, I used 10. The other 6 weren't relevant to this particular decision. And that doesn't mean they're not relevant in general. They're great tools. Your mix of bag is going to be different based on where you find yourself getting stuck the most. And that's okay. That's actually how it's supposed to work. You grab the tools you need and leave the rest. You might be able to use 2 tools and move through a decision, or 1 tool that invites you to look at the situation differently and to reframe your thoughts, and then bam, you're able to move into a decision. That's what I want for you. Use as many or as few as the tools you need to move through decision making. I want you to hear this next thing. And you might have already picked up on it in this episode. I already had the answer. I always had it. The way that I was asking the question, or that I was even asking the question, told me the answer. When I was asking myself, should I go to every other week? That's not a neutral question. There's already a lean in there, right? It's kind of biased. Like, I already actually have this specific solution, and there's already a knowing. So it was never on the table to end the podcast. It truly was as specific as, asked and answered. What do I need to sustain podcasting for the long term? And my answer was, I think I need to go to an every other week schedule. And that came like, bam, A, B, ask, answer. But then I sat in indecision about, am I willing to actually move through that decision? And I started using all the tools. But knowing and trusting that knowing, those are 2 different things, right? Like, I could have possibly asked and answered and then just moved through the decisions. But today I pulled back the curtains to tell you that between asking and answering, which I had the answer right away, what came after were all the thoughts, fears, hesitations that often come with some of the decisions we make in our business. And so I needed the process. I needed to name the fears. I needed to run through the tools. I needed to see the evidence, the positive proof. I needed to test out the stakes. I needed to define the worst case scenario, not because any of that made the decision for me, but because it cleared the noise so that I could finally hear what I already knew. Like, even just telling you those words is like crackle in my voice of like, isn't that incredible? Isn't that empowering to know that you already have many of the answers, or oftentimes you have the answers. We just have to clear the chatter. We have to clear the noise. The tools didn't make the decision. They gave me permission to trust my gut. And that is exactly what I talked about in the 3rd part of this series, episode 419. Your gut often knows before your brain catches up, or before your brain stops sabotaging you. But we don't trust it because it doesn't come with a spreadsheet or a pros and cons list. So we overthink it. We over-research, we ask one more person, and we wait for one more sign. The decision-making process that I walked you through in this series is not designed to replace your intuition. It's designed to support it, to give you the confidence to move on to what you already feel. So, here's what I decided. Super clear. Starting in Q2, the Small Business Straight Talk podcast is moving to every other week. I'm going to run it for 6 months. And if there's no negative effects or none that I'm not willing to accept, it becomes permanent. I'm doing what I need to keep showing up for you at the highest level for the long haul. I'm making room. I'm investing that time back into the business and into the operations and behind the scenes work that is making everything else better in the business. And honestly, on the other side of it, it feels so good. Like I really do feel at peace with the decision. But on the other side of it, not because the fear went away, it didn't, but because I moved through it, right? I didn't just wave a magic wand and say, don't have that fear, don't get stuck. I moved through it. I used the process and I trusted what I already knew. Okay, so let's bring this full circle. Over the last 3 episodes, I gave you a complete framework for making better decisions in your business, the blocks that hold you back, the tools that move you through it, and permission to trust your gut because it's already telling you something. And today I showed you what that actually looks like in real life, in my own life and business. And yes, it might look and feel a little bit messy, and you might need 10 of the 16 tools or 2 or 1. But what I did was I recognized the fear and I used my own tools. And I made a decision that I believe is going to make the business and the podcast better for the long run. And most importantly, I listened to my initial gut, which was saying I needed something different. And I want you to know that you are worthy of asking and answering that question in your business too. You can do something in your business just because you feel like that is exactly what you need. That's what you need to bring more joy back into your business. That's what you need to avoid burnout. That's what you may need in this season of life. So maybe that was the message you needed to hear today. I hope you heard it. I want you to also hear and take away from this that if the person teaching the framework still works the framework, so should you. And that is not a weakness. That's the process working exactly as it should. These tools are meant to move you through and onto the other side of a decision. But I don't want you to just hear my story and move on. I want you to think about yours. Because there's something in your business right now that you've been sitting on. Maybe it's a change you know you need to make, but you keep talking yourself out of it. Maybe you already know the answer and you're just waiting for someone to tell you it's okay. And I'm telling you it's okay to get quiet, to quiet the chaos and the noise, and to hear what it is that your inner voice is telling you that you need right now. All right, so if you don't know where to start with the question I started with. What do you need to sustain this for the long term? Now, mine was specifically around the podcast, but yours can be just in general about your business. That one question will tell you a lot about what needs to change. I've loved having you listen to this episode of the Small Business Straight Talk podcast, and I sure hope you found this whole entire behind the scenes, pulling back the curtains, getting a little vulnerable to be valuable. But I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back and listen to the full decision-making series if you haven't already done so. I know sometimes it's hard to keep up, and maybe that's going to be the benefit of me not doing an episode every week for you. But you're going to listen to episode 417, 418, and 419. Then pick the decision you've been delaying and run it through the process. Name the blocks, grab the tools you need, and trust what you already know. That's it. Run it all the way through the process. And that's your first rep. You're going to make it a practice that you use every time you find yourself delaying making a decision. And if you have been stuck on a decision and you know that you need to make one but keep putting it off and you'd like some coaching, support, and accountability, then we should chat. I would love for you to learn more about my one-on-one coaching by heading on over to amberdelagarza.com/coaching. And on that page, you can also book a discovery call. I would love to chat with you. I would love to hear about your business. What are your current challenges? What support you're looking for? And talk about what working together might look like. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.